Dum da dum dum.
Pistelle X68 bypassed, puncture, shoot. Unpunctured, punctured, 9.9 gram arrive balls. Oh, look out, 320. 304. 300. 294. 290. 282. 278. Pistelle X68, 1100 psi, bypass, 9.9 gram ride balls. $360. Yowza. 358. 358. 354. 356. 356. 354. Whoops, that's not supposed to happen. They should have put reverse thread on that one. Factory, out of the box, X68, not bypassed. Puncture, shoot, 9.9 gram ride balls. I don't know if I hit that hard enough. $324. $316. 308. 302. 300. 294. 286. Hit it plenty hard enough. Pistelle X68, factory marker, not bypassed. 9.9 gram ride balls, 1100 psi. $344. 336. 334. 332. Hey, look out, kneecaps. 334. 334. 334. Now let that sink in for just a minute. 10 minutes later. Now you guys, the devil's in the details. If you saw my short where I demonstrated the bypass, it specifically said 10-minute soak. So I punctured the CO2, I waited 10 minutes, and I saw that 358 feet per second, which is awfully similar to the HBA bypass, right? So here's the test. 10-minute soak on this CO2. So I punctured this 10 minutes ago. The regulator has been reinstalled. Will it limit that high-end FPS that I saw, that 358, or is it gonna cut it like we saw when I tested this with the HPA and the regulator intact? So here we go. $322. 310. 322. Weird. 322. You can't make this stuff up, guys. 322. 316. Oh, 306. Get a good hard look at those numbers. Regulation matters. Sort of. There's some dynamic loading that happens here when that CO2 is filling your chamber and trying to close that piston against the spring. It builds just a smidge more pressure, and that's where you see the increase. But that is strictly related to CO2, as you just saw. The HBA bypass blew this thing out of the water, which leads me to this question. Why would you bypass? Well, why would I bypass? Why am I not going to bypass? All great questions. If you were going to run HBA through the bottom of the grip and you wanted max power, well, that's a perfect demonstration of why you would bypass. Now, until somebody comes up with a way that they are inserting air through the rear cap, essentially bypassing the regulator altogether, through the grip is the only way, and it looks stupid as hell, let's be honest. CO2, why would I bypass? I don't think I would. It's not, is it worth the effort? I'm not sold on it, but here's a reason why I chose to try the bypass. And that is because I am going for like a 24-hour soak. So I would like to know I can puncture this marker and it perform at its peak, essentially, ahead of time. I chose 10 minutes. It was just a kind of a rough number I picked out of the air, but ultimately 24 hours is something I'm shooting for now that I've opened this can of O-ring worms. And you saw I got more power on a soak than I did with regulation. It's a numbers game, and if I was trying to outdo the next guy, I'd probably leave the bypass intact. I will continue to test with the bypass once I get these other O-rings, because I really want to know how far I can push this. And that's about it. The numbers don't lie. It's just not, it's not worth it. It's really not worth it, in my opinion. The average was better regulated than it was unregulated. But what you do with that information is completely up to you. So let's, I'll show you how I did it anyways. And we'll leave it at that. All right, well, while we're doing this, I should mention, if you noticed, the numbers were down. It's cold and snowing here right now, so CO2 is just one of those things. It always varies, so your numbers will vary from what you see people posting, and that is just a fact. So don't beat yourself up when you're lower or you're higher. It's the nature of these markers. No two launchers are created equal. So what I'm doing here is I'm just removing the grip frame. What I like to do is remove those two screws, obviously. I pull the trigger, I pull this back gently, and then I put my thumb on this linkage here. And that holds the trigger in this position so it doesn't just slop out of there and unlatch hard on this. That little spring there, I think, is gonna be problematic for some. So I hold that linkage and then you can slowly release it like that. I think it's 2 millimeter? 2 millimeter Allen wrench to open the end cap. Whoop. Pull your cap out. I don't think, oh yeah, I did bring a pick out here. And there's a little hole there. You just gotta kind of jiggle this a little bit while you pull on it. I use a pick to kind of draw it out of there. No, that's not the right pick. That's the right pick. So I stick it in the hole. That's what she said. And then I kind of torque it back and forth, and it will come out. Come on. There we go. Like that. And there is your regulator piston, your regulator spring. So how did I do the bypass? So how this works like an HBA regulator, like a tank regulator. Air comes in sort of the front area here. It goes through these two holes right there, and there's one on the other side. It travels through the center, it fills the chamber, and when the pressure in here equalizes, it compresses this, which has a little Delrin seat on the bottom that closes, traps your single shot, and repeats. There's the bypass version. Never mind the O-rings. I foobarred them when I was disassembling it. See what's missing? That little Delrin seat. And how did I do that, you say? Well, I removed these O-rings and damaged them because I'm a chump. I used a lighter. I heated this up, the brass tip here, holding this with a set of non-marring pliers. And I used a 1mm drill bit. I went in the backside here, and I literally pushed that big chunk of Delrin out of there. It took a little bit of work. I mean, once it starts pushing out, you kind of got to dig at it and whatever. I mean, it didn't just pop out. Like, I'm talking about 10 minutes worth of work. But like I said, at this point, I showed you guys how to do it. I also demonstrated that this is really, it's not regulation. It is and it isn't. I feel like they've maximized this for CO2. This is more of a safety so that something terrible doesn't happen. You know, if the pressure gets too great, you can pop O-rings and stuff. Everything is designed in a certain manner. So this spring is set up for CO2. And that's why when I run 1100 HBA through it, you don't see that jump that I was getting on the bypass, because this is closing before you're getting a full fill. The 1100 PSI is just slamming this shut before I'm getting like a full charged valve in here. So that's really the reality of it. The only way around that is obviously you go through the rear and just completely bypass the regulator. And I think you'll see that shortly. I'm sure there's some folks working on it. And that is it. Stick it back in. Put your cap back on. Don't lose your linkage. And Bob's your uncle.